To our next speaker, Pauline Schielbeek is an assistant professor in nutritional and environmental epidemiology at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She's the director of the WHO Collaborating Centre on Climate Change, Health and Sustainable Development. She's currently the health lead for the Sustainable and Healthy Food Systems Project CHEFS, and she leads the Food Systems Adaptation in Changing Environments in Africa project, known as Space Africa in the Gambia. Pauline will be introducing food systems and setting the scene, looking at the current challenges we face both locally and globally, and some of the opportunities within our food system. Great, over to you. Thanks, Pauline.
All right, yes, thank you very much, Florence. I would like to take a few minutes to talk you through the current state of our food system globally, and also the interconnectedness of our food system between and within different countries. When we talk about food systems, often we talk about diets and what people eat, or often also about agriculture, but the food system is actually much wider than that. So it encompasses everything from inputs on the farm all the way to waste. And it needs a lot of actors that together shape the food system. And this could be governing bodies, this could be civil society organizations, this could be schools or university, the national health services, but also, of course, the food industry. And my colleague Roberta will dive deeper a little bit into this system thinking later on. But just to say that these all offer opportunities for change. These are all leverage points where we could improve on our food system, but also where challenges can be found in current food systems. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that from a health and also from an environmental perspective. So just to set the scene in terms of health, our current food system is not exactly delivering healthy diets for all around the world. Still, currently, about 1.9 billion adults around the world are obese or overweight. There are many people living with micronutrient deficiencies. And this is not only, well, at the same time, also people are underweight. And this is not only the case in adults, but also in children. At the same time, we see that the environment has climate change has a large impact or adds pressure to the food systems. And here you see a report from the World Bank, which is now a little bit older, but showing the percentage change that is expected in yields of staple crops, for example, around the world. And then you see that the countries that typically have more problems with undernutrition or overnutrition are also the ones that show the most red bars, which means a large reduction of yields, of course, under a business as usual scenario, if we were not to mitigate or to adapt to climate change. And whilst we know that this is the case for staple crops, also foods that are more important from a nutritional perspective are affected by climate change as well. So you could think about fruits and vegetables, for example. And the other way around, so our food systems itself also have a major impact on the environment and climate change. And here you see an output from a paper by Marco Springman and colleagues from 2018, which show diets in 2050. That's the bottom bar versus 2010, and how much greenhouse gas emissions and water use in the food system would increase if we were to do nothing, and we continue the dietary trends as we and also agricultural trends as we see them today. So you see that especially animal products would increase our greenhouse gas emissions a lot, and staple crops also, because populations will be much larger, will very much push up our blue water use, our freshwater use. And whilst the greenhouse gas emissions are the ones, and perhaps also the water withdrawal are the ones that make the headlines, our food system has a much larger environmental impact. For example, in terms of land use, it uses about 50% of land in the world, and also is one of the biggest drivers of biodiversity loss around the world. But then there are quite some opportunities, both from a consumption and from a production side. We might be all familiar with the planetary plate, or the Eat Lancet Commission on Sustainable Food Systems, who developed a plate showing us what sort of foods we can eat to make sure that our diets are lower in greenhouse gas emissions and water footprints, to make our food systems more sustainable. And you see that that could be all kinds of different diets. It doesn't necessarily have to be vegan diets. And we see that often there are co-benefits. This is a study where we looked at what would be the effect if people would adhere more to the national dietary guidelines in the UK. And you see that it brings down greenhouse gas emissions if people adhere better to these guidelines without increasing the water footprints. But there are also many opportunities on the production side, both in terms of mitigation, different ways of farming, new types of protein sources, lab-grown meat, for example, and these all can be done in urban areas as well, in cities, and adaptation options where we use less water, different varieties, or even agriculture without land. And again, that would be a very suitable option in urban areas. And then finally, I wanted to mention that it's really important to understand that our food systems around the world are very much connected. For example, here in the UK, on the left-hand side, you see the imports or the water state of the countries that we import from. And we see that we import much more from highly or extremely highly water scarce countries than we did before. And that obviously has an impact on the food system in the UK and their resilience, but also in the countries that are already struggling in terms of water availability. And we see something similar in India, where there is a lot of staple crops are traded between states, but not often. It is the water safe states that export products to exploited states, but it's actually more often vice versa. And finally, we see that changing diets and food system transformations often have co-benefits for health. The most obvious one is that if you eat more plant-based foods, for example, that might be healthier for you, but you can also imagine that, for example, reduced emissions from farms could have an impact on air quality and respiratory health. And on the right-hand side, you see all kinds of plant-based foods that have become more and more important in urban settings. And this could be potentially a good alternative to sustainable diets. However, the health implications of those is something that is currently more under investigation.